Alright, I think we're live now. Alrighty then. Welcome everyone to the live chat. It is November 15th, halfway through November, and things are getting interesting out there. We have a lot to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about the climate change report from the government, not necessarily the National Weather Service or NOAA, but from the government. Some interesting data to go over on that. Of course, we're going to be studying the latest on the Polar Vortex and some very interesting data in that. A lot of interesting data, in fact. And I want to go over the general pattern. Of course, we're going to talk about the Thanksgiving travel and take all of your questions. So who's ready for Thanksgiving? I know I am. Are you ready? Susan, are you ready for Thanksgiving? Well, look, in my opinion, the thing I love about Thanksgiving is the food and the commercials. You say, why the commercials? Because all of them, for whatever reason, continue to think that December is the snowiest month of the season. Maybe in, I don't know, the upper Midwest, or the northern plains, but not around here. So I always get a kick out of like all of the. And by the way, for Christmas, because the Christmas commercials are already coming out, who buys a car? Who are these people? You ever wonder that?
Without telling their spouse.
Without telling anybody, like you're gonna have a car. It's like a $60,000 purchase. Yeah, here, Merry Christmas. Here's a big surprise for you. Here's the bill, by the way. I don't know. I just never understand those commercials. Another thing I can never understand is when the federal government puts out a report that contradicts science. Doesn't make much sense. As you know, I follow very carefully the IPCC, and I read a variety of books on climate change, including people who I somewhat disagree with, like Dr. Mann, and people who I find interesting, like Judith Curry, and a whole bunch of others. So I actually read the science and study a lot of it because it's important to me, and kind of into that type of stuff. If I want to actually understand what's going on, I will want to actually read the studies. Now, the government report does a great job in detailing some of the impacts. Like, for example, warmer nights. Absolutely. It's a process of increasing temperatures, higher 500 millibar heights, and of course, urban heat island effect. That all makes perfect sense. Notice where we have the warmer nights, we're not seeing it where? Let's see here. If we can zoom in. We can't zoom in. Okay. Right in the northern plains, right up here. Gee, I wonder why. It's because there's no cities up there. So you're not seeing that impact. So it makes a lot of sense. You're seeing it around Seattle, California. It's pretty clear. Desert Southwest, Las Vegas, Southern Plains, Oklahoma City, Texas, Dallas, should I say, Houston. So Gulf Coast. Come on, all those cities, East Coast, of course, all those cities. So where do you not see it? Where we have the least dense population. Makes a lot of sense. Heavy precipitation, again, this connects right to where I was talking about for the past couple of years about precipitable water values and that we should really study precipitable water values. So this makes a whole lot of sense, as does the annual precipitation. The West Coast, though, that is more of a function of what's going on with the PDO, whether it's negative or positive. When the PDO is in a negative state, you could end up with a massive drought here. Then when it goes out of that and you have more El Nino influences, then you can rapidly make up in that drought state. But in my opinion, this is why California should be renamed the natural disaster state, because it's naturally made up for a lot of boom and bust type weather events. Sea level rise, this makes a whole lot of sense on the East Coast because you have rising sea levels and subsidence, which is a natural geological process. So this makes a whole heck of a lot of sense along the Gulf Coast as well. The Pacific Northwest, you might want to watch out for that because of volcanic activity. Not only is that influencing the coastal regions, but so is the increasing sea levels combined with the rising crust around some of those volcanic activities. Something to keep an eye on. Now, my big issue here is with tropical cyclones here in this study. The tropical cyclone part, all research, all of it. I mean, the IPCC, Dr. Mann, a ton, all say that we do not have a strong connection between tropical cyclones and climate change. We just don't. Even this year, where we had above normal sea surface temperatures very clearly and an increased amount of activity, the intensity of the storms wasn't anything out of the ordinary. So this part right here, I don't know why they would do that. And the crop failure, we've actually had crop gains. So I don't know why they would do this. River flooding, yes. Wildfires, debatable, but certainly a factor. Drought, definitely. And heat waves, absolutely. This is a combination, again, urban heat island effect and rising 500 millibar heights during the summer above normal. You have that combination with increased precipitable water value in the atmosphere, so you enhance the amount of moisture in the atmosphere, increasing the heat index, and there you go. That all makes sense. With all of that being the case, I do want to point out that of all this data, and I would strongly suggest you read all of this to kind of go over as far as the impacts that we're seeing, a couple of problems. Okay, first of all, they make the claim that climate change caused $150 billion in damage, with the assumption that somehow that we wouldn't have any type of extreme weather. That doesn't really make much sense because we've always had extreme weather. So making these type of statements really hurts the bottom line of what the actual science is saying. That yes, we're having an influence, we're having an impact and whatnot. But it's a really poor statement, and it really weakens the trust of the general public when you make those type of statements. And that's why I don't understand why they would do that. Finally, this part right here, there has been copious amount of research showing, based on our current trends of where we are, and it even says in the report that we're reducing our CO2 emissions, 8.5 and 7.0 are not happening. Unless we all decide to go and change our heaters over to coal, and we just start burning coal, this isn't happening. This is more likely to happen. So here's the good news. We're on the right track. Personally, I think if we went more nuclear energy, I think we'd be in a much better place. And if we didn't mandate everything, but instead just let technology go about its way, I think we'd be much further along. This factor right here is if we actually ever get to fusion and we locally source a lot of our food, which is difficult to do because we have a growing population, so it's pretty much unlikely. My suggestion is this, as a scientist and as someone who gets to talk to you guys every day, is be realistic. No one's giving up their technology. No one. All right. Let's just stop that fantasy land. Because let's face it, the minute that X or Facebook or any of these social media platforms go down, this is just social media. Let's not even talk about electricity and heat and whatnot. People flip out. Okay? They start blaming everyone. They just go nuts. So the idea that people are going to stop eating meat or stop or cut down on air conditioning is as probable as me becoming Superman and flying around Manhattan. All right? It just ain't happening. So I believe in technology. I think this is a good report if you take out some of the hindsight stuff here that I pointed out. But the good news is that we're moving in the right direction. Some people think we need to be more aggressive, but we're moving in the right direction. So that's certainly some good news. So I'll take some questions on this report later on once I go through the rest of my analysis. But I wanted to share that with you guys, that we are moving in the right direction. We're doing some really good things. I think that I really like the idea of carbon capture. That's a promising technology. Also, hey, plant trees helps and help to build up more forests, right? And I'm just excited about the future. A lot of people are doomerisms, but I think I'm excited about the future because I'm excited to see where we're all going in this respect. So I wanted to touch on that because if I didn't do that, then you might not know. Or maybe you do, depending on who you follow on social media. In the meantime, we have a lot of activity going on with the Polar Vortex. Now, this is a topic I know that all you guys in the chat room, you guys have been watching this and you've been waiting for me to answer this. I already see some of the responses already. Yes, I know. We're not going to touch on the politics tonight, guys, because I'm not running for president yet. But what I'm noticing here in the QBO is that the easterly phase is getting stronger. And this easterly QBO influence is really important to me because the last time I had a negative QBO and a El Nino combined at the same time, it led to a lot of sleepless nights. And not me wondering where the snow was, but because I was forecasting a lot of it because the storm track was very active. I didn't want to go very aggressive with that forecast idea for the winter forecast because there were a lot of factors that I'm still watching, like the snow growth, like the ability to disrupt the polar vortex. But we're starting to see that. Now, what would really make me happy, really make me believe in a lot of this model guidance, is this chart here changing. And what I mean by this chart is that this right here, these are the temperatures at 50 millibars in the higher latitudes, 90 north to 65 north. So this is like the North Pole to, let's say, about southern Canada, right? What I would want to see after this cooling is a spike in our temperatures, because this would support the idea that the EP flux is starting to have an influence. And then it would correspond to why the model guidance is producing the rather stretched out and disrupted polar vortex solutions that we have been seeing. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on that feature and this feature right here. See, right now we have trends towards a colder stratosphere, which would support our strong polar vortex that we have currently in place. We're going to be watching this area right here. You see how this heat is building here in portions of the Atlantic to the south of Greenland? This heat transport is going to start to organize. And the idea here is that the transport that we're seeing now over the next 10 days starts to shift that towards the poles. If this forecast here verifies, then what we'll see is a warming starting to take place at 50 millibars and 10 millibars. And the warming of those zones will lead to a disruption in that polar vortex and disruption in the wind circulation. And so that's what we're starting to see in the European and the GFS, even more so aggressively in the GFS, and in the GFS ensembles, GFS. So what does all this mean to you, the snowplow operator? Because I know many of you guys are out there. And of course, the snow lover out there who just wants to see snow. It's a start. This does not mean that snow is going to occur in late November or early December for the coastal plain. It does not mean that we're going to have a ton of winter storms immediately. What this tells me is that the polar vortex is not going to be going into the winter super strong where it takes forever to break down. It already has gone through a disruption, which increases the potential for further disruption as we head towards late December and January. What this tells me is that the ideas that I had with the winter forecast, the ideas I had with disruption and punching the polar vortex and starting to create that process where we develop the high latitude blocking, is starting to evolve. But we're not at the end game yet in terms of getting that high latitude blocking that everyone would be looking for. But it gets us on the road there. And so what this does is that it increases the potential for below normal temperatures for the end of November, and then more likely a relaxation and another shot of below normal conditions as you head towards mid to late December. And then you factor in the subtropical jet stream. Now, the subtropical jet stream question, well, that is a bit of a wild card here, and I'm going to tell you why. When you're dealing with the subtropical jet stream and all of its enhanced shortwaves, you're dealing with a lot of vorticity that isn't picked up very well by observations. We are improving with the satellite data, and yes, I don't know if you heard, but a little bit of AI too is starting to improve that factor as well. It's not perfect though, and it was a little bit overblown on how good the AI was, but we'll leave that for another discussion. But with the enhanced short waves, you cannot let your guard down with the subtropical jet stream when you have polar air racing towards the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic. You have to keep your eye out for storms, and some of them could be rather interesting, especially beyond mid-December. Now, the reason why I'm focusing on mid-December is, again, our sea surface temperatures along the coast are so warm that any type of easterly component, even a northeasterly component, is going to lead to warming and mixing on the coastal plain. You guys over in the interior, I would keep an eye on this pattern through early December. Not making any guarantees, but I wouldn't let your guard down either, because we have all these short waves coming in and you have fresh polar air. So towards the end of November, if you're into Poconos or the Catskills, I would definitely just be prepared. Not so much of a 6+ inch snowfall or anything like that, but those little minor snowfalls that can catch you off guard, create a lot of issues in your parking lots and whatnot, in your sidewalks, create a lot of black ice issues, stuff like that. I would be prepared for that, just so that way you're ready to go. You're not caught off guard, because you have plenty of fresh polar air and you got an active subtropical jet stream. You just need to have one short wave interact at just the right time. Boom, there it is. So this is a very interesting pattern that is also driven by tropical forcing. Now, at this point, with our tropical forcing, this is a basin-wide El Nino. Okay, I know that there's some people running around still saying this is a strong east-based El Nino. Look, guys, it's shifting. It's shifting. It has shifted. It will continue to shift. There is all the data in the world supporting that, and the SOI is still nowhere near strong levels. So at this point, I think we can make some statements here. One, we have a basin-wide El Nino. You have a slight tilt in the sea surface temperatures towards the east, but that is really not a factor when you have all of your forcing clearly around the date line. So it's not acting like an east-based El Nino. We could lock that in. That has been the case for months now. It's not a case where we can just ignore it and that's that. I'm talking about months worth of data all pointing in that direction. So when we take a look at the MJO isn't a driver, by the way. You use the MJO in a El Nino or La Nina time period as a kind of a bellwether of where the pattern's going within an El Nino or La Nina construct. So in an El Nino construct, your stormiest conditions on the East Coast typically are in phases 8, 1, and 2, which is essentially where we're going to be marching through. Now, towards the end of November and early December, there's some focus of the MJO weekly going into phase 3 and 4. And some people have been pointing that out, saying, hey, look, this looks like a mild period. But at the same time, mild guidance is also shifting quickly into a neutral state. So what does this mean? How do we handle this split into data? Does it mean one's right and one's wrong? No. What it means is that most likely, after a nice plunge and a hit of polar and Arctic air coming into the eastern United States for the very end of November, just in time as you are sitting down and eating your turkey, we will likely see a relaxation and moderation. So I don't think this is a pattern collapse to a warm pattern. It's simply relaxation, and the fact that you're seeing support of the MJO reverting back towards phases 8 and 1 pretty quickly in the data tells me that we have a relaxation and then return to another cold and active pattern sometime between mid and late December. We'll have to work on the timing of that, see how that works out. But that's essentially what I'm seeing here when I'm looking at the data. What I'm also seeing is plenty of support for a lot of moisture to be associated with the subtropical jet stream. And I'm seeing an increased potential here for a lot of amplification of the polar jet stream. I'm not saying blocking yet, because I need to see with the evolution of the polar vortex here, okay, whether we have a stretching or we have a split. Now, in this scenario where you have a stretching, what I've been noticing is that the GFS ensembles, and even the European to some extent, is trying to create a bridge across the Arctic. So with this stretching, the question then comes, well, what happens after this 10-day period? Because if it's a GFS solution, then what we have here is a split in the polar vortex, one feature setting up towards Asia around Siberia, and another feature right in the heart of the Hudson Bay. And if that happens, then that means we start to really kickstart our high latitude blocking. If we just get a stretch, which is still, hey, it's better than what we've been having the past 3 years, then what you have is transient cold air, and then you have to work out the timing whether or not the high latitude blocking works out during that time period. But some very interesting data. I don't know what the solution is going to be just yet. But given what I'm seeing with the tropical data, what I'm seeing with the tropical forcing, and what we typically have when we have this type of tropical forcing with a negative QBO, I expect high latitude blocking to start to really show itself after mid-December. This is based on climatology from previous seasons with similar combinations. All of them featured high latitude blocking developing after mid-December and really taking hold in January and February, which is pretty much a hallmark of all active snow seasons with El Nino. So again, we'll see how that all plays out. In the meantime, we do have some active weather to talk about. So let's talk about the next couple of days, including Thanksgiving. And then I'm going to take all your questions, which looks to be very, very active here in the live chat. And we have a couple of questions here on YouTube as well. So definitely get those in. And I'll hit those in a second. Now, when I see the current conditions right now, this is textbook El Nino right here. You got a very active subtropical jet stream here, very vigorous shortwave here in the Gulf of Mexico here. Very impressive. The issue here why we're not going to be seeing a big storm on Saturday is that the timing of these shortwaves is just off. This polar shortwave is going to capture this shortwave in the subtropical jet stream, while this feature just misses it. So basically it meanders here to south to around the Bahamas, but then as it starts to interact, the timing's just off and it doesn't fully phase. On the water vapor satellite picture, you can see this is pretty impressive. I mean, this is a very impressive shortwave here. So you can see what the potential is with this subtropical jet stream and the strength that these shortwaves will exhibit in this pattern. Plenty of moisture, plenty of latent heat release, a well-developed cold core low. You have everything there. What you're missing is the necessary blocking in the northern Atlantic. This is basically a progressive flow, and because of that, with the timing of the polar jet stream off, you're just not going to get a storm development. But you can see just how close we are. So in this scenario, we got a first storm that misses. Again, because of the timing here, your subtropical shortwave is out here. Your polar shortwave is here. The timing is just off just a little bit because this is more of a negative tilt here, and this is more of a positive tilt here. So again, the orientation's off a little bit. The timing's off a little bit, so that means that your strongest forcing is going to remain out over the Atlantic, and we just get some scattered showers on Saturday. The next storm, though, this phase is early. And because of that, you get a strong low lifting up into the Great Lakes. Now, because of the strong phase early, you open up the potential for what we call a triple point. This is where we have maritime air, tropical air, and polar air all intersecting over the northern Atlantic. And the concern here with this is that you open up the potential for a lot of mixing and strong cyclogenesis. And the reason why I'm worried about mixing is because of the upper level winds. See, the winds from 250 millibars to 850 millibars are aligned in such a way that it is going to create some strong wind gusts Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. And there is potential in some of this rainfall not only to be very heavy on Wednesday morning, but feature some damaging wind. So if you have any travel plans heading out for travel on Wednesday morning, I would definitely make up some backup plans or just be prepared for some delays. The good news is that because this whole pattern is progressive and we don't have that type of high latitude blocking, this comes in and out fast. So Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, the worst conditions likely are going to be around midnight. As it clears out of here on Wednesday afternoon, we get some rapid clearing and rapid improvement. And we should see, by the time we get to Wednesday evening, tranquil conditions, and Thanksgiving itself looks to be tranquil but chilly. So that is certainly something that we're going to be keeping an eye on Wednesday, on Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. There's heavy rainfall, strong winds, a lot of mixing. We have to keep an eye and see if we have any convective development. This is more of a speed shear effect. I don't see a lot of vertical wind shear in terms of directional. It's a lot of speed shear. So if we do get wind damage, it's going to most likely be straight line wind damage. And if there's going to be any type of convective precipitation, i.e. thunderstorms embedded in this, it will likely be based on where we see the triple point, somewhere around the southern Delaware River Valley. So extreme southeastern Pennsylvania, southwestern New Jersey. That is where I'd be very cautious about wind impacts. So it's going to be a stormy night, Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. That is certainly what it looks like as we move forward. But again, Thanksgiving, Turkey Day itself looks to be dry but chilly. And then for all you crazy people who are going to go shopping on Black Friday, I don't know who still does that, but whoever it is, well, you're going to need a heavy coat because it is going to be chilly out there. I personally will be sitting on my couch and just ordering from Amazon because why go out, right? Especially when there's turkey in the fridge. So that is pretty much what we're looking at. No major winter storms yet, but certainly a lot of signs of moving towards a more active period of weather. So with that, I am going to take your questions, all of them. I'll try to stay away from any of the politics because I'm not running for president and I can't fix half the stuff you guys are complaining about. Let's see here. And of course, we will get to your YouTube questions as well. So let's see what we got here. Time to eat. The people who buy those things in commercials are the people with enough money to build the housing developments with those cars get parked in. Yeah, I would guess so. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't understand those car commercials. I really don't. You know, the only time where it makes
people in gated communities.
You know the only time where that makes any sense is if you have a teenager and then you buy them like a car from like 1995. Is that here? Make sure the wheel doesn't fall off. You know, other than that, it doesn't make much sense to me. I sure didn't get my car bought from my dad's like, oh, good, you want a car? Here's a job.
Right.
You know, I don't know. My perception is that anything the government puts out these days is designed to serve as a political narrative. Yeah, that's true no matter who. That's been true since Reagan. That's not anything new. Hell, that's been true since Carter. Actually, that's been true since World War II. So, really, it's not a surprise there. But here's what I can tell you is that the one thing I trust in is physics. That's what I trust in. I trust in physics. I trust in physical law. And it's very simple. If you put something into a system, you're going to get a result out. So then the question is, how do you adjust? That's what I would take out of it. 250 millibar jet looks like serpentine belts that go into cars these days. Yeah, definitely. Let's see here. Where did I put that data here? I know it's around here somewhere. Here it is. So let's take a look at the jet stream here. And zoom in. There we go. Okay, so our polar jet stream right now is somewhat amplified, but certainly not anything that's out of the ordinary, so to speak. But definitely, you can see that there's separation between the subtropical jet stream and the polar jet stream here. Even more interesting is the expansion of our polar air mass. Look at this. This has really grown over the past couple of weeks, which you would expect with, winter and all on the way. But the thing that I've been noticing is a deepening of the Arctic air masses in Greenland and Siberia, and very much so an intensification of these polar and Arctic air masses. So it tells me that the snow growth process has been achieved and that we are developing strong polar and Arctic air masses. So now the question is simply, with this disruption of polar vortex developing, how do we transport this polar and Arctic air further south? Let's see here. Trying so hard not to jump the gun, but my goodness, the afternoon runs are showing signs similar to top winters. Yes. Okay, that's a good point. Let me touch on that here. There is going to be a lot of model guidance. It's going to make a lot of people very excited. I have no doubt about that. And the first model guidance, like the GFS at 300 something hours, is going to show the first winter storm of the season. Will likely have so many social media hits on, especially after the past 3 years, that it might literally break the internet. Here's my warning to you. Remember what I said about the subtropical jet stream having a lot of short waves? Well, with a lot of short waves and a lot of activity, there's going to be a lot of phantom storms. So what we need to look for are key signals. I need to see rising 500 millibar heights in Greenland. Okay? As an observation, not just as a model guidance. I need to see. Well, we already seen plenty of falling 500 millibar heights and upper level lows around the Aleutian Island. So that's checked. We have convection around the dateline. Check. What we need now is for the polar and subtropical jet stream to become in alignment. And we need that traffic cop in the northern Atlantic. So in order to get to that point, we have to see what type of influence the polar vortex stretching has on the 500 millibar pattern. If you believe some guidance, the Canadian, the GFS, and the European, okay, that's almost all of them, it would suggest that late December through February is a bonanza of high latitude blocking, a negative NAO, perfect setup, a lot of people very happy. But I am putting out this warning, not to saying like, hey, this is nonsense, but just to say sometimes when you have model guidance that's too good to be true, it can be. So I'm just trying to put that warning in your head. Like, okay, there's a lot of favorable data, really like where we're going in the observations, but don't jump the gun yet on some of this model guidance because, sometimes it could be a little bit too good. Building expensive high-res on sandbars is what caused such a high value of damage. Yes, high-rises. Okay, yeah, buildings. Yeah, I would agree. One of the problems with the climate change analysis in terms of costs on buildings and whatnot is that Yeah, it was probably not a good idea to build a skyscraper right in the shore of Atlantic City ahead of Sandy. It's probably not a good idea to build a whole bunch of high rises in Miami when it's sinking. Those type of things, they add up. We also need to really not only expensive high rises, but lower income homes. We need to stop building them in flood zones. We have a commercial, like we see a commercial every week on one of the TV channels we watch, where they talk about giving away homes and this and that. Then you find out where they put the homes in, and they're in a freaking flood zone. I'm like, gee, no wonder why they're giving them away. Because they can't sell them probably. China and India are adding coal plants a week, and their increasing usage was larger than U.S. Yes, exactly. That is true. See, India is a growing economy, and good luck telling them they're not allowed to put air conditioners on when they have temperatures around 110 in the summer ahead of their monsoon. So they have a lot of energy demand. They're trying to figure out how to grow that. Meanwhile, they have a lot of coal plants. There's some signs of them adding some nuclear. This is not an easy problem, and the United States alone isn't going to solve it. But to me, the best way to address that is by increasing and sharing technology. Let's see here. Let's talk snow, mountains of snow. All right. Well, I know Snowboss really wants that. And look, I know a lot of guys definitely are interested in that. I'm still holding on to the idea in my forecast, the winter forecast, and that December is going to be our mildest month of the winter. I'm not saying all of December is going to be mild. I'm saying that December is going to be the warmest of the three. The thing that kind of catches my eye is if we actually achieve this polar vortex disruption, this stretching, and we start to see this high latitude blocking, it really opens up a lot of potential for late December. If I was going to pick a place where I would see that type of development of mountains of snow, so to speak, it'd most likely be in the Poconos, Catskills, Hudson Highlands. I'm really hesitant going on the coast yet. I really, really want to see what happens with our first storm and those sea surface temperatures. Because I think that would create an environment of more mixing than anything else. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself because I actually have to see the storm development and all that good stuff. But just thinking off the top of my head, the warm sea surface temperatures along the coast obviously is something that I'd have to really keep an eye on. Even though 10 millibar jet consolidated but still has a strong feed from the tropics, the 70 millibar polar vortex is really diffuse. Let's pull that up. Let's pull up 70 winds. Okay, so this is 70 millibars. The polar vortex is still rather circular, so I get your point. The winds are not as strong as opposed to what you see at 10 millibars. I mean, this is pretty strong here. So what are we going to have to watch for? This is what you're going to watch for in these observations. You're going to start if we're going to see this stretching take place, you're going to start to see these winds here get stronger and these winds here get weaker. And that feature, that stretching and pulling on each side of the polar vortex starts to warp the upper level winds and then starts to allow for that transport south. Now, all the model guidance, I mean, literally all of them are saying that this is going to happen. So we should start to see this really start to show up in actual observations, most likely right around Thanksgiving. Maybe that Thursday, Friday, we should really start to see that showing up in the observations here at 10 millibars and at 70 millibars. If we don't, then boy, oh boy, the model guidance is in for a heck of a bust. But at 70 millibars, you're starting to see some of that warping starting to take shape here. But you're right, at 70 millibars, we're not dealing with a strong polar vortex in terms of wind speed, but certainly in organization. Not only Siberia, but parts of areas south of Siberia have some real cold air from the surface up to into the atmosphere. 850 millibars. Yeah, absolutely. Non-weather note: as a Cowboys fan, I'm rooting big time for the Chiefs this weekend. I'm sure. Let's see. They play the Eagles. That should be a fun game. I just hope they don't talk about a certain singer 50 times. That's all. Since elevation is so critical to snowfall in this area, absolutely. Do you know if there is a substantial difference in snowfall from street level in New York City versus top of 1,000? Oh, absolutely. Top of a 1,000 foot buildings. Yes, absolutely. In fact, one interesting study found now it's hard to pull this off because you obviously are heating the building, so the top of the building is still going to be warm because you have that heat and the heat rises to the top of the building. But the theory is this: if you turned off the heat in the building and you just let it settle, right, you would actually build up more snowfall on the top of those buildings than you would at the surface, because the surface you still have boundary layer conditions, still concrete still leading to some minor urban heat island effect, even if you turned off all the heat. The problem is that because of the nature of the way that the buildings are built and the way that heat is transported in those buildings, which has to be transported, or else you end up with a lot of issues in the way that condensation works in the buildings and with the heating and air conditioning in the buildings. With that said, there would definitely be a difference if you remove that factor between the snowfall that accumulates on the top of a skyscraper versus the surface. But because of the nature of the way that the skyscrapers are built and the way that heat builds off the top of those skyscrapers, it mitigates that factor. With that being said, there is a very interesting study that is being done. I believe that they're working on it in Boston, in fact, where they are studying whether or not rising air coming off of skyscrapers, right, the heat in the middle of a storm, enhances microscale lifting factors and mesoscale mixing factors to enhance precipitation rates, which could be another factor in urban heat island effect. So basically, this rising motion enhances the transport of moisture into the cloud base and enhances the precipitation rate from those clouds. So some really interesting stuff that they're still working on. I think they'll probably find some influence. I don't know how great, but it certainly makes sense that you could develop this gradient. And then every time we had a winter storm, we start seeing these powerful mesoscale gradients developing around Newark, around the I-95 corridor, dropping these, 2-3 inch per hour snowfall rates. It would make a lot of sense when you combine all the observations that we've been seeing. So certainly that is a great question, Anthony. Absolutely outstanding. So a lot of research is definitely going into that. If you want a snowy winter on the coastal plain, the last thing you want is snow in November. Historically, winters with November snow on the coast are very short on snow in the winter. That is very true. And a lot of that corresponds to La Nina winters. Now, why is that the case? Typically in La Nina winters, your winters are quote-unquote front end, i.e. you get a lot of your winter weather activity in December. And then you kind of get this building of the southeast ridge, and January and February are typically very quiet months. With that being the case, and you actually end up with an early spring. Like last year, we just had a little bit of winter and then spring. That is part of the Southeast Ridge complex, right? It's part of the influence where you get your storm tracks focused towards the Great Lakes. In November, you get some of those polar air masses coming in a little bit early. They interact with the Southeast Ridge, and then that's how you get your snowfall in November, which leads to very quiet years. Sometimes in El Nino, especially strong east-based El Ninos where you have a lot of your convection focused to the south of Hawaii, same type of scenario happens, but it's a little bit different in that you get a little bit of snow in December and November, and then it's cold and dry in January and February because the subtropical jet stream gets suppressed and remains active over the southern mid-Atlantic and not so much over the northern mid-Atlantic. Just a light snowfall for Christmas or light snow cover around time is perfectly fine. I will take seasonal cold weather, which I think we'll see. I think we'll definitely see seasonal cold weather. Just as long as we don't get tropical rainforest Christmas like we had in some years. Yeah, I remember that one Christmas where it was like almost 70. I was annoyed. I was like, I can't do Jingle Bells when it's 70 out. I'm telling you, this is probably why I'll never move to Florida or to the Carolinas as I get older. I can't do it. I need my seasons. Let's see here. Yes, Thanksgiving weekend will the Friday after and Sunday afternoon have risk of stormy, rainy weather, or is it just the travel day before? This looks like pretty much just on the travel day before, specifically Wednesday morning. After that, it's pretty quiet through the rest of the Thanksgiving weekend, to be honest with you. I mean, once you get past that one rainstorm, it's pretty quiet. It's chilly, but it's quiet. So, not too bad for Thanksgiving, to be honest with you. It looks like once we get past that Wednesday morning, it ends up being, seasonably cold and dry. So, not too bad. Not too bad at all. Hopefully no one's flying out on Wednesday morning. If you are, I would suggest getting some snacks and a lot of patience. That's the best thing I can tell you. Any chance of a brief tornado from the wind shear? I don't think so in this scenario. I'm not convinced we'll see a line of convective. This is not a setup where we have like a line of thunderstorms. But I'm going to keep an eye on it, obviously. But this is more like of a speed shear type of event rather than vertical wind shear. When we take a look at the winds here, it would be a good idea if I actually pull up data. Here we are. Where are my winds? Here we are. Okay. So as this is coming through, first of all, around midnight to 7 a.m. So you already are limited in terms of instability, let alone the time of year as far as potential instability. But in terms of the wind speeds here, at 850 millibars, the 850 millibar jet is racing out ahead of the upper level jet at 250 millibars, which isn't too unusual considering the nature of the trough here, of more of a trough that is, if I could pull it up here, more of going into a negative tilt. So that's not too much of a surprise here. In this case, your strongest winds at the mid-levels come through ahead of the jet streak at 250 millibars. So you have a lot of your lifting taking shape. You have a lot of winds moving in the same direction, 850 millibars down to the surface. You're not seeing a shift, let's say, from the south to the west at 850 millibars. It's a lot slower. In fact, as you go up higher in the atmosphere, it's more like from the south, southwest, and then we don't get west until later on in the time period when the cold front's already passed. So the timing of the wind shear in terms of vertical direction is delayed, so you don't have that sync up. And then also the factor that a lot of your winds are aligned in a straight line when you do have that sync up of the triple point over southern New Jersey, which all points to more of straight line wind events rather than any type of tornadic event. I see a lot of people like Eric Webb. Oh boy, Eric Webb. Oh, what is he calling here? Calling for a blowtorch in December. Well, all right. Well, he's not here to defend himself. So, do you think that will happen? Also, do you believe the region will see any snow chances all in December? Okay. Fed oh man, I'm going to screw up that name. We'll just say Fed. Okay, so I don't like to critique other people's forecasts unless they're right here to explain it themselves, because I don't know what he means by blowtorch. Does he mean blowtorch in terms of, I don't know, the Great Lakes or the eastern United States? I don't know. And for what duration? Now, I did show in the tropical forcing here, where was it? Here we are, where I showed this factor right here, right? So I could see where they're going with that type of idea. In phase 3 and 4, if you ended up, instead of going into a neutral state, if you went out into this area out here, right, then this would lead to a mild pattern. This would essentially set up, for early December, a zonal pattern, but it doesn't remain sustained. So I certainly can see the point and the idea of going with a relaxation, like I said earlier, and creating a milder period in December. That would definitely be within the realm of possibility on the data here, but it's not sustained. It's just an intermediate relaxation. And we know that because pretty much every model in terms of tropical forcing all suggests a shift back towards phase 7 and 8 and 1. 7, 8, 1. There you go. So that would point to mid to late December of flipping back. So the idea of relaxation is more than ideal in this scenario, because we're not at the point, based on the evolution of our polar vortex, to just have a sustained high latitude blocking pattern rip its way through from December all the way through February. We're not there yet. We don't have the data to support that. We're not at the evolutionary point in our pattern to set up that type of scenario. So the idea of a relaxation and moderation, I'm definitely reasonable. Idea of a blowtorch, if you get locked in and you stay in this area, I mean, you could certainly make the case. So what you would have to do is make the case that the tropical forcing that has been in place since April is going to collapse and shift. I think this is part of the east-based El Nino idea, in which that... Okay, so this is what you would have to see for that type of verification. See all this convection here that's been firing and sitting up here, going back to God knows. In fact, hold it. Better yet, let me pull up this data. 1 minute. Bear with me. I'm going to pull up some good data if I can find it. Let's see here. I know it's somewhere around here. 50 millibar winds. Let me just pull up. I know what data I'm looking for. I just gotta find it. Bear with me. Here, I'll just go right here. I really want to, if I get this piece of data, I think I'll be able to illustrate exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, let's see here. No. Yes, here we are. Okay, so this right here is our anomalies, and this is basically our convection. Now, this has been in place since May of 2023. That's a long time. So what you would have to do to support a blowtorch and to lock in a phase 3 and 4 in the MJO, and not just like an intermediary, but like more like a sustained, like it's locked in, blowtorch, blah, blah, blah. What you would need is two things. One, this forcing shifts towards 120 west, which so far I see no indication of that happening. Between right around here, you see where it's like all dead here in substance, right? That is this area here. Okay, so all this convection here shifts to the south of Hawaii. That would lead to a shift in the subtropical jet stream and support the blowtorch idea. The other thing you would need is the polar vortex, after stretching, consolidates and becomes very strong. Those are the two mechanisms that would support that type of pattern evolution. If you add the forcing of an east-based strong El Nino, which I know that a lot of people are jumping on the idea of that because of the sea surface temperatures right here. I get it. If you just looked at this, I get it. I understand what you're trying to do. Problem is that that's not what's happening in the atmosphere. So that's where we would go with that. If the volcano erupts in Iceland, would that impact local environment in Scandinavia to the point that it could impact local upper level patterns? Don't know. It depends on how strong this volcano is. If it's something like what knocked down the air travel a couple of years ago of that magnitude, no, it's not strong enough. You would need a massively strong volcano to really set that up. I think the year we will see a lot of phantom storms, but also a lot of real ones, most likely. And it's going to keep us on our toes, and most likely I'm going to have to deal with a lot of GFS, creating a lot of interesting solutions and a lot of social media nonsense. CFS for December, January, February, March are cold. Last 46-day Euro weeklies are cold. Last 46-day Euro control cold. Yeah, I get it. Definitely a lot of model data supporting the winter forecast. Absolutely. I've just been burned too much the past 3 years. You know what I mean? Are they sensing the possible PV disruption? Yeah, that's pretty much what they're doing. All right, now we're finally getting to YouTube. Yes.
I've been trying to get your attention.
Yeah.
We actually have one question on Twitter, so can we go to that first and then we'll go to YouTube?
Yeah, okay, yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so on Twitter, MJH609
okay.
says, I've always heard about the 540 line.
Mm-hmm.
Is that usually a rain-snow line? I see it really creep down in some maps.
Okay, outstanding question. 540 decameters. That is, the 540 line is a thickness line between 1,000 millibars and 500 millibars, right? At 540, that is the demarcation where the atmosphere is cold enough to support a transition from rain to snow. It's typically, in many cases, most cases, a excellent measure of where your rain snow line is in the forecast. So if your 540 line dips down to the south of you, you're more likely to see snow. With that being the case, sometimes that can be a little misleading if you have a little bit of warm air. So sometimes you can have the 540 line dropping, but you can still have some mix of sleet. I've never, and you will never come across a scenario where the 540 line drops south and you have rain. It will always be some sort of frozen precipitation. So there's a good demarcation of rain-snow line, and 99% of the time you're dealing with a snowfall event in that 540 line. So it is thickness. It's the thickness of the column from 1,000 millibars to 500 millibars. So once you get below 540, remember, because cold air, the heights start to contract. So that's what we're actually seeing here. The colder the atmosphere, the greater the contraction, and the more likely you're going to see that mixing line. Many times, you'll have 540 just to the northwest of you, but you have frozen precipitation in the form of snow, sleet, and freezing rain. And then as that 540 drops, you can literally watch the transition from that wintry mix over to pure snow as you move forward. So yes, definitely, it is an outstanding use for following and forecasting your rain snow line, and something that I use quite frequently. Now, any other questions from Max?
I don't see anything, just that one.
Okay, well, we have a ton here in YouTube.
Oh, yeah. YouTube's busy.
Wow, and it's already 9 o'clock, but we will answer all of them. Nuclear is the way to go. An outstanding job, by the way, by the premium guys, premium chat. Outstanding questions.
Izzy gave you a tip, too.
Awesome. Wow. There's some great questions. Well, I mean, it is that time of year, but wow, we will answer all these questions, even though it's going to be past 9 o'clock.
Time of the year.
Yeah, it is. I was thinking about playing some Christmas music, but I was afraid of getting striked. So I decided not to.
Yeah,
but with polar air and high latitude blocking potentially present, do you think December could be more wintry than expected? Oh, the potential is increasing, but don't hold me to it. I'm very, very skeptical of wintry precipitation in December and El Ninos. But if I was looking for observations and model data to support that, this is what I've been showing is what I would be looking for. Is the system for Friday night into Saturday morning too far offshore to be major nor'easter? Yes, it is. The timing's off just a little bit. If you're in Maine, it's going to be a pretty impressive storm. But for the northern mid-Atlantic, it just phases a little bit too late. We'll see how much mixes down. Any interesting developments in terms of snowpack in Siberia? I know October is usually a key month. The snowpack has grown, and one of the key factors that I've been keeping an eye on is not so much whether the snowpack will impact the polar vortex, which is going to be an interesting factor, but I think the primary driving factor with that is going to be the EP flux, not so much the Siberian snow impact. But what I have been watching is the growth of the snowpack in Siberia and Canada. And the reason why I've been watching that is because I need to see that snowpack support the polar and Arctic air masses as they advance southward. So one of the things I was very concerned about in the winter forecast was, hey, is this snowpack going to not grow and then the air masses that come in are modified? Doesn't look like that's a concern anymore with the way that the snowpack has grown. Would warmer sea surface temperatures allow more snow to fall if there is not enough mixing? Okay, so warm sea surface temperatures have a very interesting impact. On one hand, it's like nitroglycerin to a storm, right? Because you have this cold air coming in, you have the warm air, you have the warm water with the warm air, so you have rising air with the warm water, and you have the cold air coming in, and you're having this intense cyclogenesis, and it intensifies your storms. All that is true. The other factor, though, is that the warm water on the coastline enhances the boundary layer temperatures. So instead of you starting off at 37, you start out at 38 or 39. And that difference in your temperatures could mean all the difference between Belmar getting rain-snow mix and Freehold getting snow. So when you're making a snowfall forecast, you have to analyze the mesoscale boundaries and analyze the wind impacts. Some of this has to be analyzed while the storm is evolving, and then you make your adjustments. But you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of if you get that northeasterly wind coming into the coast on Long Island, on New Jersey, what type of increase in temperatures, and you're going to want to watch your dew points with this and see whether or not that impacts your wet bulb. What your wet bulb is basically your temperature once the heavy precipitation starts. So if that wet bulb is creeping up ahead of everyone else over the interior, you're probably going to want to watch out for a rain-snow line or a wintry mix line along the coast. Now, on the other hand, okay, this is where things get really complicated. Because you have that gradient, you have a lot of rising air. So you get that rising air, it enhances your precipitation rate. So right to the west of that gradient is where you can end up with some really intense heavy snowfall. So what did we just do? We just discussed 3 different factors that influence your forecast. Now your job is to figure out which one is the most important and for each location. And that is how you get your giant snow gradients in your winter storms, where some areas get 2-3 inches and other areas get 15-16 inches. Let's see here. I would really like to see the change is that storms have to come together better. Been just so dry that really needs to change the overall pattern. Yeah, right now, again, this is typical during El Ninos in November, where the pattern is just off by just a little bit. Remember 2011, 2012, October, coating to 1 inch, even hair places north, but very warm, hardly any snow that winter. Yep, absolutely. Do you think the cold shots this year will have staying power or very up and down continuing through the winter? I think the early part of the winter is more transient. The later part of winter has a better potential of being more sustained. I think the good news for snow lovers around New York City is that it can't get much worse. Well, that's true. You can't get much worse than 0. So today, something like a west base El Nino at the same time as far east base La Nina ever occurred would be okay. Was thinking of this today. Did something like a west base El Nino at the same time as far east base La Nina ever occur? No. But that would be one heck of a dynamic if it did. Thanks for what you do and for getting everyone's questions. All right, no problem, Izzy. Any rain for Lakewood, New Jersey Friday night? Definitely scattered showers, but not any heavy rainfall. Let's see. Wow, there's just keeps on coming. From Fled Weather.
I love you.
The northern hemisphere overall is experiencing near record breaking snow cover, according to observations. This is true. For many locations, this is true. At least the NOAA charts that keep track of the snow of this. Yes, that is definitely true and definitely has my attention. Which is why I'm getting a little bit more confident on the idea of a wintry December. Not there yet, but definitely, again, the observations are where you'd want to be to get to that point. So definitely something to keep an eye on. And yeah, I mean, as Fed points out, the pattern's definitely there. The model guidance is certainly there. Maybe it's just because we've all been burnt a little bit the past 3 years, looking for that winter weather pattern that really is perfect. And after what we experienced in the early 2010s, I mean, that was something to experience, The potential is high. I'll put it that way. If I wanted to look for the leading into the winter, the data that we're seeing, this is where I would look for an active winter weather pattern. But now we have to see how it all comes together. So that's what we're going to be watching. And with that, I think we answered all the questions. And it looks like everything. Any other questions on X?
Yeah.
All right. Well, it is 9:07 and my voice is starting to go. So with that, I'm going to call it a night. Again, thank you guys for outstanding questions. Boy, when we get our first winter storm, it's going to be freaking blockbuster. As always, if you want to share, help this channel, definitely spread the word of what we do here every Wednesday night. And of course, if you're interested in becoming a premium member, please subscribe. It helps out the channel quite a bit. It helps out what I do and what I am able to provide for you guys. So I really, really appreciate it. Our next live chat will be next Wednesday. Is that cool?
I guess.
Yeah. Well, see, the good thing is that
I'm not dealing with a bird, so I mean.
that's true. Yeah, we catered out this year. We're smart about it. So we're going to enjoy our Thanksgiving rather than spend cooking on it. Yeah, why not? Okay. But, well, it depends. I mean, if we like.
You got some on YouTube.
Oh, what do I got on YouTube?
That's interesting.
Steve, can you go on Joe's weather show? He likes guests. If I'm invited, I don't think I could just go. That'd be kind of rude. Like, hey, I'm here. Who the hell are you? No, he knows who I am. But if I'm invited, I'd be more than happy to have a chat and definitely go, and have some fun with that. But, that's always cool. What else can I say? I can't just show it. That'd be kind of funny. Hey, I'm here. Who the hell are you? It's like, I don't think that'd work. But we will have a live chat next Wednesday. We will talk more about Thanksgiving. Maybe I'll find a turkey hat. I'll put a turkey hat on. That'd be fun. And we'll have some fun.
Yeah.
Why not? So I don't know.
More alert.
Yeah. Well, you know what? The other thing too, I don't know whether it'll go for the full hour because, I think other people are going to be traveling. Might not be as many people, but we'll definitely have a live chat and definitely cover the storm event that moved through
You
and
can always rewatch it,
yeah, exactly.
that way.
That's true too. That's true too. Well, we have gone over an hour and I'm tired. So we're going to shut it down for tonight. Thank you again for watching and for subscribing and all that stuff. Spread the word around. And as always, stay safe out there.